Hey, welcome back to the Healthy Living Scottsdale podcast. I'm your host, Coach Zach. I'm here with Coach Brandy and Coach Caden. And today we are talking about Ozempic or GLP-1 drugs. So excited to get into that. But before we do, we're going to give a little shout out to a client of the week. And this week's client of the week is Miss Tammy Johnson. Saw her this morning. So, I see her all the time, but it's always like in passing. And this morning I was out on the training floor and she came in and I was watching her work out and I was like, she looks incredible. I'm so excited. I told her, I was like, you got to come in and do an in-body scan because we got to see this. Her body just looks totally different. She's doing awesome. So I'm super excited to see what that looks like. But she's just like, not only is she seeing really good results, she's passing the eye test, right? But also she's just always so happy and she just loves her workout. She's like one of those people that it's fun to be around, right? So, and I learned that she's Canadian from Canadian. So it makes sense, right? Because who's ever met a Canadian that they didn't like?
Right. Well, I love to hear you say that about her as well. And I'm going to say, like, I think it was like a week or two ago, and I was like, Tammy, I was like, we've been working together for a little bit now. Like, how are you liking the workouts? Like, how do you feel like, is there anything I can bring to you a little bit better? And she goes, this is the hardest that I've ever worked and I've ever been pushed. She goes, just keep doing it. And I was like, my girl, let's go.
Awesome. Well, Tammy, keep up the great work. Okay, guys, this is an episode that I feel like has been a long time coming. We just kind of like kicked the can down the road a little bit, and today's the day. So I'm sure this won't be the last time that we talk about this, but it's the first time. And we're talking about Ozempic or tirzepatide or GLP-1 as it's known, semaglutide, like a bunch of different names, right? Tirzepatide's kind of the new kid on the block, which I guess is from a result standpoint for fat loss, or I shouldn't say fat loss, for weight loss, seems to be performing the best. But Ozempic is kind of the brand name that has put this drug on the map. So first off, Brandy, you've got
I've got my
you got 8 pages of notes over here. So I'll let you explain to everybody what a GLP-1 agonist is.
Okay, so first of all, GLP-1, what does that stand for? So it's glucagon-like peptide. What it is so your body naturally makes glucagon, and it's a hormone. It's a peptide hormone
in the intestines.
Produced in the pancreas. So, and what it does is it raises the concentration of glucose and fatty acids in the bloodstream. So these drugs are glucagon-like peptide, so it kind of simulates that same type of reaction in the body. Initially, for people with type 2 diabetes to control blood glucose levels in the bloodstream.
Because it increases insulin levels.
Increases insulin
or
in the
insulin
body.
secretion.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And we know insulin, right? Its job basically is to eat up sugar in the blood, right? Or
the
glucose in the blood. And then glucagon kind of has the like opposite effect, which is telling the liver to release more glucose. So we kind of have this relationship where it's like insulin versus glucagon, and they control your blood sugar levels in response to what you eat.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. So without giving everybody like a full-blown science lesson, because I don't know that that's necessarily, I don't know necessarily that that's what people really care about so much, but what they do care about is the impact that has, right? Of what happens when I take a GLP agonist drug, right? So what's happening in the body?
Yeah, so a couple of things that are happening, and multiple things are happening when you take this drug, but a couple of things that are happening. So it acts in the brain to reduce hunger signals in the brain. So that's one thing that it's doing, and it's telling your brain that you're not feeling hungry. So you'll have that impact. And then it also slows down stomach emptying to increase the feeling of fullness. So slows down, your food basically moving from the through the small intestine into the stomach.
Your gastric emptying is kind of what it's referred to, right?
Right.
Okay. And we don't necessarily know, I guess, it seems like from all the research I've done, exactly why that there's this appetite suppressant impact, right? It's like, well, we know people basically that are taking like a semaglutide, they're just like, I just don't feel hungry, right? And we're not entirely sure how the whole entire thing functions. Like, we get some of it, but from a person's standpoint of like, I'm going to lose weight here, really all they're focusing on is the appetite suppressant aspect of it. Is like, hey, I take this drug, I don't feel as hungry, and therefore I don't eat as much, right? That's like their surface level that they're thinking of, and they're not thinking about, okay, what's the impact, what's happening in my pancreas, what's happening to my liver, what's happening at a hormonal level. And so I think that it's important to kind of understand, but let's be real, for the people that we're speaking to, for the most part, they're just like, I just take the drug and I don't feel hungry and I don't eat, right? And then I lose weight.
Right.
And I think that's kind of the message that people are getting, right? What else, Brandy? You have anything else? And then we can kind of shift gears on.
Just in terms of, why are you not feeling hungry? I know there's there's an interaction between other hormones in the bodies, like the lectin and ghrelin. So the hormone ghrelin in your body is the hormone that sends those like hunger signals, like that tells your body that you feel really hungry. So there's some interaction with the GLP-1s and how that interfaces with your ghrelin and lectin hormones. So I think there's something, and with this, it's somewhat of a newer drug for weight loss. So there's a lot that's still being studied that we don't know. So still a lot of unanswered questions about exactly how it's working, exactly what long-term, and I think we'll probably get to the impact of this. But, there's really just not a lot of data out right now to know what the long-term impacts of this drug may be.
Yeah, and it's been approved, FDA approved since 2017, right? Which is a decent amount of time, not a super long time, but that's for diabetes, right? And it makes sense when you're talking from the standpoint of insulin, like that makes sense to everybody. Oh, it's a diabetes drug. We're talking about weight loss. It's kind of this thing where we're going, oh, hey, we got this diabetes drug. People are losing weight on it. What exactly is happening here? And just kind of a side note, like some insurance companies will pay for this drug if you have diabetes. They don't like to because it's very expensive. But for weight loss, insurance companies are not paying for that. And it's not cheap, like $1,400 to $1,700 a month. So it's a very, I guess one side effect is it's bad for your for your pocketbook, your wallet, if you are taking or if you're taking it and insurance isn't covering it, right? And you're doing it for weight loss. So okay, so now that everybody kind of has a decent understanding of what exactly is happening inside the body, Caden, what do you think are some potential like downsides to this?
Yeah, no, 100%. So I'm going to say some of the potential downsides that I've kind of been looking into a little bit is, I'm going to say, unless you're still going to make, I'm going to say, the essential lifestyle changes on the diet side, the working out, the sleep side, stress management, I'm going to say, unless those things are happy, you're going to get stuck on Ozempic for the rest of your life to maintain whatever that perfect weight is for you. And I'm going to say, I'm not a huge believer in, I'm going to say, medicating unless it's absolutely necessary. So if you are going to jump on Ozempic, I'm going to say get to your weight goal, but along the way, I'm going to say the emphasis that needs to be, I'm going to say made and really focused on is the weight, the nutrition, or the weight training, the nutrition, the sleep, stress management. Because then once you hit that goal, I'm going to say you can start to lower the dosage and eventually get off to maintain that weight without having to stay on this, I'm going to say, for the rest of your life.
Yeah. So I'm glad that you kind of went that direction, right? So there are some known side effects to Ozempic. Pancreatitis. Research shows that like the risk of pancreatitis increases by 900%, because you're asking the pancreas to do something that it overwork, basically. Pancreatitis is a bad thing, and can, if it's chronic, can lead to pancreatic cancer, which we all know is kind of like a death sentence, right? Like people don't really survive that. So that's an issue. Thyroid cancer was shown in rats when they were doing, it hasn't been determined in humans, but in rats. Gallstones, right? And then there was one other major one I can't think of, right? So there's some scary things medically that can happen, but Kate, in the direction you went, which is kind of what I wanted to talk about primarily, is 2/3 of people, research shows that 2/3 of people, once they stop taking Ozempic, gain the weight back within a year.
And not only that, can I jump on board here?
Yeah.
So not only that, so as you're taking one of these GLP agonist drugs, so you're losing body fat, but you're also likely losing skeletal muscle mass along with that body fat. So maybe you get to your ideal weight, and then you stop taking the drug. You have lost skeletal muscle mass, which is very hard to increase your skeletal muscle mass,
especially as you age,
especially as you get older. So now you're going to be at even, at a larger deficit in terms of skeletal muscle mass. It also has an impact on your metabolism as well. So your metabolism is not going to be as efficient because you've lost skeletal muscle mass. So those are concerns. Malnutrition is a concern that I think that I have, and that I know that is something that I was reading about as well, just because your body does not feel hungry. So you're eating very little amounts. And if you're not prioritizing, like changing those habits, like you talked about, Kaden, then you could end up being malnourished. And then protein is just super important to make sure that, to try to minimize the impact of the skeletal muscle mass loss, you really need to prioritize protein.
Yeah, and there's been some studies. Most of the studies, like medical studies, are all based off of weight loss, not muscle mass versus fat loss, because that's very, very difficult to get an accurate depiction of what's happening. And so from a medical standpoint, they're just looking at weight loss, but there've been some other studies done that are kind of like independent, and they're showing usually about it's like a 50-50 drop in both skeletal muscle mass and fat mass, right? And that's huge because, like you said, it's really hard to get that back once you lose it. And then we've done a couple episodes where we talked about morbidity and muscle mass, right, and how like the more muscle you have, the lower your morbidity rate is, or risk of morbidity is. And that's incredibly important, right? So not only are there kind of these like underlying medical side effects that could be major, right, that could potentially happen, but now also because we're losing weight and we're losing muscle mass as well, that's scary and could lead to disaster, right? So I know so far, if somebody's listening to this, they're totally against this, right? I am and I'm not. Right. So I think for a specific population, this makes sense, right? Like if you're somebody that's morbidly obese, you've got all of these, you're diabetic, you've got heart issues, you've got all these other things. And it's like, if you don't lose weight, you are going to die from that. I'm like, the lesser evil is let's get some weight off of you. absolutely, I will say, like, you need to do that, right? But there's a right and a wrong way to go about this. And the problem that I foresee, because research now is saying 1 in 8 Americans is taking a semaglutide or has taken one. The problem that I see is the problem still exists. We're not addressing that. We're suppressing it, right? It doesn't change your eating habits. It just reduces the amount that you're putting in your body. And so this is my big problem with this, is like, you're not changing anything to fix the problem. You're just putting a giant Band-Aid on it, which you said, Kaden, is like, you now have to take that for the rest of your life because you didn't fix the problem. And now as soon as you stop, right, you're just going to go back to your old ways. Now you're less efficient, your metabolism's slower, you have less muscle mass, like all of these things. It's a, like, you start taking it, you can't stop unless you're working on the other things as well.
Right.
Right.
You need to make lifestyle changes.
Yeah.
To be successful.
And I think so we have some clients that are doing this, right? And I've had conversations with them, and I'm like, okay, you're going to come in, you're going to do an in-body scan every other week so that we can track your muscle mass. And then your protein requirement does not change based off of whether you're taking this drug or not taking this drug. So 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, right? So if you're 200 pounds, you need 200 grams of protein. That doesn't change. And how many people do we know? How many clients do we have percentage wise that hit their protein intake?
Very few.
10%? Is that generous?
Yes, probably
That's
generous.
pretty generous.
Like consistently, right?
Yeah.
Consistently 10%. So you're taking people that we're preaching to them all the time. Get your protein. It's number one, water and protein, right? 2 top things. We're like, you got to do this. You got to do this. It's going to have the biggest impact. And then you're setting yourself up where you're basically like paralyzing your stomach. So then,
and you're not feeling hungry anymore.
you're not feeling hungry, and people are already telling us, I can't eat that much protein, right? We're like, you got to get the protein. And now you're setting yourself up at a disadvantage where you're even less hungry and less able to take the protein. And it's like, that's a recipe for disaster and you losing a lot of muscle mass, right? Skeletal muscle mass. So there's a right and a wrong way to go about this if you are going down that path, right?
Right.
If you're not morbidly obese, it's like, don't even consider it, right? If you've got 20, 30, 40 pounds to lose, let's fix the other things instead and change the habits and get the results, right? Without any of the risk. If it's like you're at risk of dying because you're super overweight and this is an alternative, at least to get us started while you work on the other things, I'm okay with that. Right? Like, I'll support you in that for sure. So, the other issue was dehydration. That was one of the other, kidney issues. Yeah. Kidney stones. Because semaglutide also, because of the emptying of the gastric and the impact on gastric emptying and the impact on your intestines, dehydration is a risk factor. And I'm like, oh, okay. So reduce the protein and then the water intake goes up. And those are the 2 things that we see our clients struggle with the most.
Right. One other interesting, like, potential side effect that is, I think, starting to surface is there's an impact on birth control pills, and people are now becoming like pregnant on this pill because it's having an impact on birth control.
So there's some sort of like,
it reduces the efficacy of birth control.
They're hormone issue. Like, okay,
right. So that's just one
I haven't heard that. Beware.
Well, and then I think so. One of the things that concerns me too is because this is so popular. We're starting to see. I just heard recently that Nestle is now coming out with like a microwavable meal that's specific to people on like these GLP-1 like weight loss drugs. So now, we're not fixing the problem of eating processed foods. We're saying continue eating processed foods by, these large food corporations that are, now contributing to this issue. I'm sure they're probably higher in protein and they're going to be marketed that way.
Yeah.
But we're still not fixing the problem, the lifestyle change of, getting away from processed foods, prioritizing whole foods and protein and water.
How awesome would it be? This is just like, I'm just dreaming here. How awesome would it be if the food industry got into a war with the pharmaceutical industry? And now they're like, before it's like, let's go ahead and poison people and then we'll give them drugs to fix it. And we got this like awesome, monopoly money-making system. This is how my brain, I'm going full conspiracy theorist here. But what if Ozempic changed that and now all of a sudden they're like, they hate each other because it's like, hey,
they're buying less food.
They're buying less processed food because they can't eat more. And it's like, hey, that's hurting our profits over here. Anyway, whatever. Anyway, guys, we'll leave it right there. But I just want to say we're here to help people, right? We want to support people in their journey. If you come in and you tell us, hey, I'm going to do this thing. If you've made that decision, that's your decision to make. Our job and our responsibility is to help coach you through that and guide you through that to maximize your health, right? And so if somebody comes to us and say, hey, I'm going on Ozempic or one of the other drugs, we're going to come up with a game plan and we're going to make sure that you are doing it correctly and you're not going to lose the muscle mass and set yourself up for failure. So we're here to support you guys. We obviously have some opinions about it, but just know that we want to help, right? We want to support you and guide you. So that's all we got for you this week, guys. We'll be back next week with more great stuff. Thank you so much for listening to the Healthy Living Scottsdale podcast. Do you have a question that you'd like for us to answer live on the podcast? If so, all you need to do is head over to the Apple Podcast app on your iPhone and do 3 simple things. First, leave us a rating and review telling me what you think of the podcast. In that review, ask anything you want related to health, fitness, or nutrition. And if you want a shout out, leave us your Instagram handle or name. That's all you have to do. Then listen to hear your questions answered live on the next Q&A episode.